Morning, all. All right, so we're going to start things off talking about the Pittsburgh Penguins today. It's a fascinating story to me because the Pittsburgh Penguins have some really big names on their roster. And clearly, the Penguins are still trying to get back into the playoffs. And it's understandable why. Now, they're 3-5-1 currently. Last year, after 9 games, they were 3-6. They ended up finishing 3 points outside of the playoffs. The season prior to that, through 9 games, they were 4-1, and they missed the playoffs by one measly little point. One. So I totally understand why Kyle Dubas and those above him would say, hey, we've got to try to, get back into the playoffs and make some noise. And maybe they do, but this digging themselves into a hole early on in the season, I mean, it's got to be seen as part of the reason why they missed the playoffs last year, and so we'll see how it turns out this season. Now, people will point out that they're playing against Vancouver tonight, so if Vancouver wins, this will be seen as a jinx, yada yada. If I had that kind of power, things would be quite different, but I don't. On Tuesday, they come home. So after tonight, this ends their road trip. Road trip's not been all that fruitful for them so far. Tuesday, they come home, they play Minnesota. Minnesota's playing a tough game, and Minnesota's very good on the road, so that's not a gimme. That's not an easy 2 points. Thursday, they're at home against Anaheim. Anaheim's above 500, and Anaheim's been pretty competitive in games, whether it's because Dostal's trying to steal one, or, just some lucky bounces here and there, but I don't think Anaheim's an automatic 2 points this season like they've been in previous years. And then next Saturday, they're at home against the Montreal Canadiens. So between Anaheim and Montreal, those are winnable games. And they've been winning winnable games, and I'll talk about that when we get there. So the following Tuesday, on the 5th, they're away from home against the Islanders. And that starts a 3-game road trip that could be tough because Thursday, they're against Carolina. And then Friday, they're against the Washington Capitals. So 3 games in 4 nights. Islanders, Carolina, Washington, none of those are going to be easy, right? We know the feud with Washington. We know that Friday night game is going to be hyped up as Crosby against Ovechkin. How many more of these battles do we have left? But for the Penguins, outside of that obvious headline and that, head-on battle, they need to win these games. So Malkin so far is their leading scorer. Through 9 games, 2 goals, 9 assists, 11 points. Now Crosby, slow start by his standards. A goal and 6 assists, 7 points. I don't have any doubt that Crosby's going to end up being above a point per game and that he's going to have a really strong season because he's Sidney Crosby. It's kind of what he does. And maybe the Four Nations tournament could be awesome for him. Maybe he comes out of the Four Nations tournament rejuvenated and Pittsburgh goes on a run as a result afterwards. But again, that's a long ways off. And between now and then, Pittsburgh has to keep their head above water or at the very least stay close to a playoff spot. Lars Eller, 9 games, 4 goals, 2 assists, 6 points. One of the many veterans on this roster. This is an older team. Erik Karlsson, 9 games, 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points. Rickard Rakell, 9 games, 4 goals, 1 assist, 5 points. Jesse Puljujärvi, one of the younger players on the team. 8 games, I should say. 1 goal, 4 assists, 5 points. Kevin Hayes, 9 games, 3 goals, 1 assist, 4 points. He was added this past offseason. O'Connor, 9 games, 3 goals, 1 assist, 4 points. And Pettersson, 9 games, 1 goal, 3 assists, 4 points. Now, in net, Bloomquist had himself quite the game last night against the Edmonton Oilers. But he's 2-3 with a .911 save percentage. He's easily the best of the 3 goaltenders, which tells you that Bloomquist is overperforming a little bit, or at least performing above what was expected, and it also tells you that they're having struggles elsewhere. Jari, 1-1 with an .838 save percentage, and he's been sent down to Wilkes-Barre on a conditioning stint. So they're trying to get things going, and Nedeljkovic, 0-1-1, .869 save percentage for Nedeljkovic. So they're not getting their money's worth from Nedeljkovic or from Jari. So when we look at the overall stats, and it's early, but I think through 9 games we can get an idea of stats here. Their 3 goals per game, that's 17th in the NHL. Their goals against is a problem. 4.22 goals against per game. They're 31st in the league. They are only better than Philadelphia. So Pennsylvania, those teams, not good at keeping the puck out of their net. And I mean, Pennsylvania is close to Transylvania. It's almost Halloween, so scary stuff and all that. Make your own joke. 22.2% power play. They're 13th in that category. So their power play is much better than this past season. Their penalty kill at 80% is 12th. So their special teams have been good. that's a positive for the Pittsburgh Penguins. But looking at their scoring by period, it doesn't matter what period you're looking at. They've been struggling. They've been outscored 10-6 in the first, 13-9 in the second, 15-11 in the third. At least in overtime, they've outscored their opposition 1-0, although they do have a shootout loss as well. So when we look at their 9 games, this is where it's interesting to me too, because against Detroit, Montreal, and Buffalo, they get wins. Those can be considered 3 teams they should get wins against if they're going to end up above the playoff line. Then they have the shootout loss against Calgary. Calgary, a team that's been surprising so far this year and how well they've performed. And then there's the regulation losses. The Rangers, contending team, makes sense. Toronto, while there's all this discussion about how good or bad Toronto is, they're still a playoff team. So, yeah, that's a loss. Carolina, playoff team. Winnipeg, best record in the NHL. And the Oilers, despite the slow start they've had, the expectation is playoffs. But this is the problem for Pittsburgh. The teams they've played against that are supposed to be playoff teams, they've generally lost in regulation against. Detroit's the only one you could argue that people might have been looking at this season as potentially being a playoff team, because Montreal and Buffalo still seen as being a little ways away, right? And so this tells you that Pittsburgh, in games they should win, there's a chance they're going to win those, but as they've fallen down the standings, now you're in a situation where you're not winning against enough teams. It's just the math starts mathing the wrong way. And then when you look at their contract situation and you look at the age of the players, I'm not sure how you fix it. And that's the curious part to me is. So let's just say that Pittsburgh ends up finishing close to the playoffs again this year. Well, then what do you do? Because they've already got everybody signed that they can have signed long term. Are you looking to bring somebody else in? Do they look to bring in another veteran? Eventually, you need young players on this team. Crosby has a cap hit of $8.7 million till 2027. It's a great contract. There's a no movement clause there. So if there's ever a time where Crosby says, you know what, I want a chance to win, and Pittsburgh goes into a rebuild, he can kind of say where he wants to go. Malkin's in the same situation. He's signed till 2026. So only one more year past this one at $6.1 million, which is a huge deal for Pittsburgh. No movement clause for Malkin as well. There's Brian Rust at $5.13 million till 2028. He hasn't been producing so far this season the way that I think they'd like him to. Notice he's not on the list here. Raquel, $5 million cap hit till 2028 as well. His contract currently has an 8-team no-trade clause. So he can submit a list of 8 teams he doesn't want to go to, which really handicaps the team. Then Bunting, $4.5 million till 2026. He has a 10-team no-trade clause just for this season, and then beyond this season it does change. But for the purpose of this video, this season's one we're looking at as being the more important of the two. And it tells you that almost everybody on this team has some kind of trade protection. But the contracts aren't that out of whack until you get to Karlsson. Karlsson at $10 million till 2027, it's pricey. And he has that full no movement clause, which he waived to go to Pittsburgh. So for Karlsson, he has that no movement clause. And even if he didn't, I'm not sure if at some point in time Pittsburgh wanted to move Karlsson, what that market would look like. Because again, the players are getting older and older, and so that's going to drop down their value. Letang, $6.1 million till 2028. He has a no movement clause until 2026, and then it becomes a modified no trade at that point. Graves, $4.5 million till 2028. He has a 12-team no trade clause. So the way that can work is if you don't want to get traded, well, then you put all of the teams that are outside the playoffs or expected to be outside the playoffs on your list, and then there you go. You're very likely not going to be traded because the teams that you could be traded to are ones that, in all likelihood, Pittsburgh would have to figure out a dollar in, dollar out kind of trade, and it makes it harder to move the player. Jari, $5.38 million cap hit until 2028, and he has a 12-team no-trade clause. All of this, of course, from Puckpedia, and that's problematic. Jari right now really struggling. Again, they've sent him down to Wilkes-Barre to try to get his game back and his confidence back, because that's how it is with goaltenders. When a goaltender's confidence is shaken or, they start getting in their own head a little bit, it can get ugly really fast. And vice versa, that when their confidence comes back, Sometimes it's a really big save. Sometimes it's a quiet game where they get a shutout and only face like 15, 16 shots. Start racking that up and getting that confidence back. All of a sudden they look great. Jari needs that break. He needs that game where he looks fantastic, saves 35 out of 36, and gets his confidence back and rolls from there. Nedeljkovic is at a $2.5 million cap hit for 2 more years, but again, at an .869 save percentage, small sample size, they're not getting their value out of that right now. So again, from Puckpedia, their buyout / retained money, so dead money, you're at $3.74 million, which is not awful, but the problem is their current cap space, again, according to Puckpedia, did I say cap friendly? I may have slipped and said cap friendly. Puckpedia, 93,000. I don't have access to cap friendly. I don't work for the Washington Capitals. $93,521 in current cap space. It would be really funny if I worked for the Washington Capitals and I was doing a video talking about the struggles of the Penguins, though. That would be funny, I will admit. But they don't have any cap space. They have contracts that, even if they wanted to move, basically players have a say in where they're going to go and when. Pittsburgh's in a tough position. They're not a playoff team right now. They're going to need to rally again, as they have the previous years, to get close to the playoffs, but they didn't make it into the playoffs. And the East is tough. The East is very difficult to become one of the top 8. And I think it looks like Ottawa may finally have figured out a way to stay in said top 8. I still think that Detroit can make a push for it. And that's going to be tough for a team like Pittsburgh, because now you're going to have other teams you have to worry about. So let's just say the Islanders fall apart, but if Ottawa and Detroit end up being good enough to be above that playoff line, it just makes things more difficult for the Penguins from now until the end of the season. And again, without any cap space, I'm not sure how you fix that. They don't have draft capital either in order to fix the cap space issue. They do have a first-round draft pick this year, which I don't think they're going to move. They don't have a second-round draft pick this year, so that's problematic. They could use a third-round draft pick to maybe free up some cap space and, do some kind of magic with a 3-way trade, but it's not going to be easy. Kyle Dubas has a very difficult job ahead of him. I will say, too, that Dubas taking on the job in Pittsburgh, I think it's a far more difficult job than Toronto from the perspective of making the playoffs. I think it's much more difficult with Pittsburgh at this point in time. They're a veteran team. The league keeps getting younger. And, yeah, it's going to be tough. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. And I promise, Vancouver fans, I am not trying to jinx the Canucks tonight. I don't believe in videos having jinxes, because I've talked about teams that, are doing well and then they don't fall apart, and vice versa. Teams that aren't doing well and they don't get better when I talk about them in a video. So we'll see how things go for the Penguins. Let me know your thoughts, though, regarding Pittsburgh and where they're at and what they need to do. So your GM for a day, how do you fix it? Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe in the event you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.